we'll see how long it takes the cloud to deliver. Good. So let's discuss logistics about the next reading. Were we finished with was everyone complete with the Kingdom of Subtle Matter?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Kingdom of Subtle Matter. Great. So
hopefully we're prepared.
the glory for and fall of life, I think, is pretty short. Oh no, it's not super short. There's definitely some short ones, and this is kind of average. Great. And it looks to be there looks to be a break. There looks to be a number of breaks. I see a kind of a clandestine break at the top of 123 also. There's an indent there. Do we want to do the same as we've been doing? Read a page in a circle and stop at each section and discuss, and maybe go back, read that section again and surge forward. Is that working for everyone?
So I'm a little confused. I hear you say reading a page, and then I'm hearing you say reading a section.
Well, typically we've been reading a page each, and at the end of each section, we've been stopping.
Yeah, gotcha.
Oh, okay. Okay. Maybe I wasn't clear. Basically, I'm saying, should we stay on the same rhythm of what we've been doing, stopping at each section, or do we want to read the entire canto?
I am feeling a bit more fragile today, so I think maybe if we stop at each section, rather than rolling forward, I think it may be a good idea.
To check in. Yeah. Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that, Jeffrey. Yeah.
That's good with me as well.
Good. Okay, great. So the order, we'll have a meditation, but the order on my screen will go John Robert, Andrea, Marco, Jeffrey, and then me. And can we do a 5-minute meditation? A little bit longer.
Sounds good.
Yep, sounds good.
I'll time it. Okay, welcome everyone. Nice to be with you all.
Book 2, the Book of the Traveler of the Worlds, Canto III, the Glory and the Fall of Life. An uneven, broad ascent now lured his feet, answering a greater nature's troubled call. He crossed the limits of embodied mind and entered wide, obscure, disputed fields where all was doubt and change and nothing sure. A world of search and toil without repose. As one who meets the face of the unknown, a questioner with none to give reply, attracted to a problem never solved, always uncertain of the ground he trod, always drawn on to an inconstant goal. He traveled through a land peopled by doubts in shifting confines on a quaking base. In front, he saw a boundary ever unreached and thought himself at each step nearer now. A far retreating horizon mirage. A vacancy was there that brooked no home. A journey of countless paths without a close. Nothing he found to satisfy his heart. A tireless wandering sought and could not cease. Their life is the manifest incalculable, a movement of unquiet seas, a long and venturous leap of spirit into space, a vexed disturbance in the eternal calm, an impulse and passion of the infinite. Assuming whatever shape her fancy wills, escaped from the restraint of settled forms, she has left the safety of the tried and known.
Unshepherded by the fear that walks through time, undaunted by fate that dogs and chance that springs, she accepts disaster as her common risk. Careless of suffering, heedless of sin and fall, she wrestles with danger and discovery in the unexplored expanses of the soul. To be seemed only a long experiment, the hazard of a seeking ignorant force that tries all truths and, finding none supreme, moves on unsatisfied, unsure of its end. As saw some inner mind, so life was shaped. From thought to thought she passed, from phase to phase, tortured by her own powers, or proud and blessed, now master of herself, now toy and slave. The huge inconsequence was her action's law, as if all possibility must be drained, and anguish and bliss were pastimes of the heart. In a gallop of thunder-hooved vicissitudes, she swept through the race fields of circumstance, or, swaying, she tossed between her heights and deeps, uplifted or broken on time's inconstant wheel. Amid a tedious crawl of drab desires, she writhed, a worm mid worms in nature's mud. Then, Titan-statured, took all earth for food, ambition the seas for robe, for crown the stars, and shouting, strode from peak to giant peak, clamoring for worlds to conquer and to rule. Then, Wantonly enamored of sorrow's face, she plunged into the anguish of the depths, and, wallowing, clung to her own misery. In dolorous converse with her squandered self, she wrote the account of all that she had lost, or sat with grief as with an ancient friend. A romp of violent rapture soon was spent, or she lingered, tied to an inadequate joy, missing the turns of fate, missing life's goal. A scene was planned for all her numberless moods, where each could be the law and way of life, but none could offer a pure felicity. Only a flickering zest they left behind, or the fierce lust that brings a dead fatigue.
Amid her swift, untold variety, something remained dissatisfied, ever the same, and in the new saw only a face of the old. For every hour repeated all the rest, and every change prolonged the same unease. A spirit of herself and aim unsure, tired soon of too much joy and happiness, she needs the spur of pleasure and of pain, and the native taste of suffering and unrest. She strains for an end that never can she win. A perverse savor haunts her thirsting lips, for the grief she weeps which came from her own choice, for the pleasure yearns that racked with wounds her breast. Aspiring to heaven, she turns her steps towards hell. Chance she has chosen, and danger for playfellows. Fate's dreadful swing she has taken for cradle and seat. Yet pure and bright from the timeless was her birth. A lost world rapture lingers in her eyes. Her moods are faces of the infinite. Beauty and happiness are her native right, and endless bliss is her eternal home.
So I'm wondering if somebody can help me with she. I assumed at first it was nature, but then as the reading went forward, I thought maybe she refers to life.
I'll say that that was my assumption, that she refers to life.
If you look on the first page of the canto, about 12 lines from the bottom, Ashwapati is kind of wandering around here, and he says, their life is the manifest incalculable movement of unquiet seas. And he goes on describing life, and then 4 lines from the bottom, she has left the safety of the triad and the unknown. So that refers back to life. And I think that's who he's talking about all along here.
Yeah.
Life has come into the world of evolution from the life world, which is a fixed world, which doesn't evolve. It has its own fixed laws. Here, life comes into the world of matter, which is an evolutionary world. She's got to find out how this works, and she's kind of lost, and she's swinging back and forth between one possibility and another, the heights and the depths, and all over the place.
And all these uncertainties that are espoused at the beginning, right? That we have to struggle with every day. We
You got it.
This strikes me as a particularly existentialist passage, because life here plays itself out, or animates itself in the shadow of this sense of purposelessness, this sense of not having a meaning. And there's a despair, it seems, or an angst or an ennui that pertains to being purely alive without the higher evolutionary emergence, such as mind, to give a meaning and purpose. And so on the one hand, it is life in the biological sense, but at the same time, I think it's life in the human sense of our everyday life, and the cycles of our longings, our desires, our frustrations, our projects, and the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. I hear all that here. So it's human life as well as life in a evolutionary biological sense, I think, and it has this this kind of coming up against but not naming the nihilism at the base of this particular manifestation, without the whole, without a sense of the whole.
I was really struck, having had the experience of being lost in addiction. It felt like a really amazing description of the state that I was in for several years. And especially I'm seeing this line, aspiring to heaven, she turned her steps towards hell. And I really experienced all of that fully. I was totally lost in the ups and downs of highs and lows and emotional upheaval and a fierce lust that brings a dead fatigue. Oh my. So at the end of that, I realized I had lost my soul. And that's to me a description of this not being in your awareness of your true self, as the last few lines describe, yet pure and bright from the timeless was her birth. So when I lost that awareness, I was lost in suffering.
and aspiring to heaven, she turns her step towards hell. There we have Milton poking through.
That's true.
I was scanning to see how often bliss is mentioned, and I found it a couple of times. It's easy to miss in all of this. And anguish and bliss were pastimes of the heart, and then the last 5 lines, yet pure ... and endless bliss is her eternal home. It's I hear you about the existentialism, Marco, and I always feel like when I'm reading existentialist writers, they're missing the holy trinity of the Sanatana Dharma. It's like existence, consciousness, and where's bliss. And Sri Aurobindo, even though even though there's a lot of anguish and life fighting for existence in this, it's still the bliss is there in the background. It's just not easy to see when we're going through hell. And this, yeah, I'm curious to see where he's taking us with the next one. I think we're actually transitioning into heaven's light in the next section. So I wouldn't, it would be hard for me to agree that this is like the existentialism of the French philosophers of the 1950s or whatever. It's there's just a little something extra here. But I do hear you.
I wouldn't at all read it exclusively as an existentialist expression. I hear you too, that there's more going on as well, and like life here is a cosmic force too, which I don't think it is so much for it can be for existentialists, but it's not focused on, it's not emphasized. One thing I like about this description of life is the adventurousness of it. In multiple places, there's a sort of just going for it, careless of suffering, heedless of sin and fall. She wrestles with danger and discovery in the unexplored expanses of the soul. And then there's the hazard of a seeking ignorant force. And I think later on it comes back. There's the flickering zest and the chosen chance and danger for playfellows. I hear a little Nietzsche in there as well, poking through the kind of, like bravado of life, and the just the pure joy of it, of going for something, of exploring a possibility, although not always the wisdom to see the consequences of doing so. And that's, I think, where the shadow side makes its appearance.
Andrea, I want to thank you for the personal sharing. That's so heartfelt that you gave.
I agree. It gives us I don't want to, anyway, I'm not sure what I'm going to say, but
thank you for receiving.
You seem such a deep person, and
I did this whole thing.
I kind of suspected there were depths that were unexpressed, and now some of that is coming out. But we all have our darknesses, right? So.
Yeah. I once talked with my astrologer and about that time, and he said you had to explore the depth. You had to fall.
Yeah.
Really, really all the way back down to earth, into the dirt. So I did, with a passion. Yeah, and it ended with a bang. Thank you all.
Perhaps it's what we're collectively doing as well, in our larger human family.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Marco.
So maybe we're good to go forward into the next section.
Marco, you want to continue?
Sure. This now revealed its antique face of joy, a sudden disclosure to the heart of grief, tempting it to endure and long and hope. Even in changing worlds bereft of peace, in an air racked with sorrow and with fear, and while his feet trod on a soil unsafe, he saw the image of a happier state. In the architecture of hieratic space, circling and mounting towards creation's tops, at a blue height which never was too high for warm communion between body and soul, as far as heaven, as near as thought and hope, glimmered the kingdom of a griefless life.
Above him, in a new celestial vault, other than the heavens, beheld by mortal eyes, as on a fretted ceiling of the gods, an archipelago of laughter and fire, swam stars apart in a rippled sea sky. Towered spirals, magic rings of vivid hue and gleaming spheres of strange felicity floated through distance like a symbol world. On the trouble and the toil they could not share, on the unhappiness they could not aid, impervious to life's suffering, struggle, grief, untarnished by its anger, gloom, and hate, unmoved, untouched, looked down great visioned plains, blissful forever in their timeless right. Absorbed in their own beauty and content, of their immortal gladness they lived sure. Apart in their self-glory plunged, remote burning, they swam in a vague lucent haze, an everlasting refuge of dreamlight, a nebula of the splendors of the gods made from the musings of eternity. Almost unbelievable by human faith, hardly they seemed the stuff of things that are. As through a magic television's glass, outlined to some magnifying inner eye, they shone like images thrown from a far scene too high and glad for mortal lids to seize. But near and real to the longing heart and to the body's passionate thought and sense are the hidden kingdoms of beatitude. In some close unattained realm, which yet we feel, immune from the harsh clutch of death and time, escaping the search of sorrow and desire, in bright, enchanted, safe peripheries, forever wallowing in bliss, they lie.
In dream and trance and muse before our eyes, across a subtle vision's inner field, wide rapturous landscapes fleeting from the sight, the figures of the perfect kingdom pass, and behind them leave a shining memory's trail. Imagined scenes or great eternal worlds, dream caught, or seemed they touch our hearts with their depths. Unreal seeming, yet more real than life, happier than happiness, truer than things true. If dreams these were, or captured images, dreams truth made false earth's vain realities. In a swift eternal moment fixed there live, or ever recalled come back to longing eyes, calm heavens of imperishable light, illumined continents of violet peace, oceans and rivers of the mirth of God, and griefless countries under purple suns.
So I need some unpacking here. The sequence starts with And while his feet trod on a soil unsafe, and I'm not sure who he is here to begin with. John Robert, you're always so good with that stuff.
It's Aswapati.
He is Aswapati. He is Aswapati, the king. And so he's in the previous section, he's been experiencing life in this world, in the evolutionary world. Now he has a vision into life in its original world, in its original worlds. So that's what he's seeing here. It's not an evolutionary world. And he's seeing the beauty and the glory of it there.
And we have all this intergalactic imagery, which I always find it odd because as someone who studied astronomy professionally, I always seem to end up with these passages when I read aloud. Something's going on there.
Just you.
You attract them, Jeffrey. You know, when we were going through that passage you're just talking about now, about the towered spirals and magic rings of vivid hue and gleaming spheres of strange felicity and so on, I was imagining some artist seeing this vision that Sri Aurobindo had, and he gives to Ashwapati, painting it, and it's. I mean, how do you really describe something like this? Well, Sri Aurobindo uses images, magic images.
Because this last week I was asked, a colleague of mine asked, has a boy, he's around 9 or 10, and he's fascinated by astronomy. And so he also knows a lot about it. He knows more about the solar system than I do. And, and he asked me to come in to his class and present something about astronomy to his class. I had to prepare this talk with images, right? And the question he asked me was, what is there beyond the universe? Like I said, in all my career, I've never been asked that question by anybody. You know, it took a 10-year-old boy to ask. So in order to talk about ideas about what's beyond the universe, I had to talk about the universe. So I gave them a view from the planet Earth right up to the largest scales of the universe, filled with images. And essentially, what I gave them was what this passage, you know, the images that go with the images taken from the universe that go with these words, is what I presented in a way. So it has this anchoring in this last week, this passage for me.
Jeffrey, I would not object if you set that PowerPoint presentation slides to these words.
Yeah.
I wouldn't object. I'd like to see it, but only if you're inspired.
Yeah, I could put it up. Yeah, it's good.
The nerd in me had to look up the invention of television because it always surprises me when I read words like this in Savitri, but it was invented in 1927. By the 21-year-old, I just looked it up, by the 21-year-old Farnsworth, introduced in San Francisco. So I imagine like Sri Aurobindo was well read and all this stuff all these ideas were flying around the globe at the time. It just seems to me before its time, but it probably wasn't at all. It was probably very contemporary.
And then I want some help with the end of the section. So so in that part on the astronomy bit, there's a kind of hang on with this idea of it being, I think it's what you were saying, John, about being kind of apart from the world of humans and not engaged. And so there's this sense of separation there, I guess, if I'm not mistaken. And then at the end,
excuse me, Jeffrey. I think Sri Aurobindo is going to say in a little while that even though Ashwapati could see this, he couldn't get there. So just exactly as you're saying, it's
right.
separated.
And then at the end we have oceans of rivers and rivers of the mirth of God, which is kind of an interesting statement, and griefless countries under purple suns. So I just want a little, and this idea of violet peace too. So I just want a little bit of help with this. Anybody?
When we read those lines, what I saw was Van Gogh, the purple suns, you know, this incredible explosion of light and color that he was able to bring to us. To me, this is part of life. It is, we all have, I believe, we have the ability to look into these ideal spaces where everything is absolutely exquisitely beautiful. Otherwise, we would just be lost in the lower parts. We have all of those parts of mind and have some access to that, whether that is in dream world or when we maybe have an artistic, creative impulse, or just a higher knowing that I believe we all have access to, and that he is describing here. That's not readily available in the actual life that we're living in the material plane, but we can see it somewhat. That's my sense.
It shines through.
Yeah.
It shines through.
Yeah.
And sometimes you catch that.
Yeah. Those moments of bliss, we all know.
Yeah.
We all have those.
Sometimes it's just quote unquote sunlight, because we diminish it with our little worlds, you know, with our bounded minds, and then some light, endless light. Darkness has room no more. That's 2 lines from one Aurobindo sonnet.
Yeah, and purple is the color of peace in the qualities of the mother. Purple is Shanti, peace. It's a very rich, beautiful purple. And I'm glad you mentioned dream, Andrea. It's mentioned so many times in this passage. I just scanning in the last on 120, I see it like four or 5 times.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So one more thing I could say is that the skies, the night skies, the Milky Way, all of that evokes and has evoked in human beings for millennia the dream of other worlds, or the dream of the world that's behind, like you were asked in that class. That it's, in fact, for a long time, the Western world thought it was the sky, was the heavens. It wasn't physical stuff like Earth, and so it just evolved to us.
I was just talking with John Robert a couple of nights ago. In Spanish, I was always jealous because Spanish, the word cielo means both sky and heaven. And I thought that we didn't have a word in English that had that same double entendre, but we do. It's just super uncommon. It's welkin, W-E-L-K-I-N, and it means both sky and heaven, the same connotation that the Spanish cielo carries. It's just not super common, but we see it in Sri Aurobindo's writing. It appears 4 or 5 times in the greater canon of Sri Aurobindo's writing. It's a beautiful, beautiful word. Ah,
True about French as well as Spanish. Ciel is also the term in French that
ah,
means both sky and heaven in a way. Yeah.
ciel. Thank you.
So thank you. I think that helps me unpack a little bit, although there's a lot going on here. So
I think it's more than we can unpack.
yeah.
Doesn't fit in anything.
Shall I resume with unpacking the infinite?
Please.
You can leave it packed if, as far as I'm concerned, Mateo. It's not going to stay there anyway.
And I know that it's not up to me either. This, once a star of bright remote idea, or imagination's comet trail of dream, took now a close shape of reality. The gulf between dream truth, earth fact was crossed. The wonder worlds of life were dreams no more. His vision made all they unveiled its own. Their senses, their happenings met his eyes and heart and smote them with pure loveliness and bliss. A breathless summit region drew his gaze, whose boundaries jutted into the sky of self and dripped towards a strange ethereal base.
Dip.
Thank you. And dipped toward a strange ethereal base. The quintessence glowed of life's supreme delight. On a spiritual and mysterious peak, only a miracle's high transfiguring line divided life from the formless infinite and sheltered time against eternity.
Out of that formless stuff, time mints his shapes. The eternal's quiet holds the cosmic act. The protean images of the world force and the strength to be, the will to last from a deep ocean of dynamic peace. Inverting the spirit's apex towards life, she spends the plastic liberties of the one to cast in acts the dreams of her caprice. His wisdom's call steadies her careless feet. He props her dance upon a rigid base. His timeless, still immutability must standardize her creation's miracle. Out of the void's unseeing energies, inventing the scene of a concrete universe, by his thought, she has fixed its paces. In its blind acts, she sees by flashes of his all-knowing light. At her will, the inscrutable supermind leans down to guide her force that feels but cannot know. Its breath of power controls her restless seas, and life obeys the governing idea. At her will, led by a luminous immanence, the hazardous experimenting mind pushes its way through obscure possibles mid chance formations of an unknowing world. our human ignorance moves towards the truth that nescience may become omniscient. Transmuted instincts shape to divine thoughts. Thoughts house infallible immortal sight, and nature climb towards God's identity. The master of the worlds, self-made her slave, is the executor of her fantasies. She has canalized the seas of omnipotence. She has limited by her laws the illimitable. The immortal bound himself to do her works. He labors at the tasks her ignorance sets, hidden in the cape of our mortality.
The worlds, the forms her goddess fancy makes, have lost their origin on unseen heights. Even severed, straying from their timeless source, even deformed, obscure, accursed, and fallen, since even fall has its perverted joy, and nothing she leaves out that serves delight. These two can to the peaks revert, or here cut out the sentence of the spirit's fall, recover their forfeited divinity. At once caught in an eternal vision's sweep, he saw her pride and splendor of high-born zones, and her regions crouching in the nether deeps. Above was a monarchy of unfallen self, beneath was the gloomy trance of the abyss, an opposite pole or dim antipodes. There were vasts of the glory of life's absolutes. All laughed in a safe immortality and an eternal childhood of the soul before darkness came and pain and grief were born, where all could dare to be themselves and one, and wisdom played in sinless innocence with naked freedom in truth's happy sun. There were worlds of her laughter and dreadful irony. There were fields of her taste of toil and strife and tears. Her head lay on the breast of amorous death. Sleep imitated a while extinction's peace. The light of God she has parted from his dark to test the savor of bare opposites. Here, mingling in man's heart their tones and hues, have woven his being's mutable design, his life a forward rippling stream in time, his nature's constant fixed mobility, his soul a moving picture's changeless film, changeful film, his cosmos chaos of personality. The grand creatrix with her cryptic touch has turned to pathos and power, being's self-dream, made a passion play of its fathomless mystery. So there's a little break. Shall we have a little break?
Mm-hmm. So there's a shift here. Could we clarify the shift in perspectives or voices? Here, the she, is this still life, or is it some other aspect, like more of the divine feminine or nature?
Well, life is her, is she. That's what she is.
Yeah, yes, and world force comes in. I think that the she starts with world force, which is Shakti, which is that exactly. Yeah, yeah, Chit Shakti, consciousness force. I don't
It's
know.
at the top of page 121, protein images of the world force.
So it's
That mean protein images?
Means
protein like proteus.
mutable,
Oh,
changing,
okay.
Mutable. Oh,
mutable or changing. Yeah.
Is it linked in with Proteus?
Yeah, it was the god who changed form all the time. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
okay. Thank you.
And the he is a little different here too. There's Ashwapati, but the he here also refers to the mind or absolute, the one.
If you look again on page 121, the 5th line down, she spends the plastic liberties of the one to cast in acts the dreams of her caprice. His wisdom's call steadies her careless feet. So there he's talking about the one, the transcendent.
And it takes the shape of Ishwara, the executor, right? Ishwara down below, where it's if you have page number, line numbers, it's 202. Is the executor of her fantasies. That's you remember from The Secret Knowledge, this whole wide world is only he and she, this is the knot that ties together the stars. That's Ishwara Shakti, the divine masculine and the divine feminine, but manifest and transcendent. That the play is slightly different than the transcendent. I don't know. It's difficult to tease out. It takes there's whole long passages in Synthesis of Yoga teasing out like the difference. It goes back to that chapter also in Life Divine, teasing out the differences: Brahma, Maya, Ishwara, Shakti, Purusha, Prakriti. There's subtle textural differences between these. And the executor is, when I see the word executor, I think Ishwara. When I see executrix, I think, and this is Sri Aurobindo's training in my mind. When I see executrix, it's Chit Shakti, Maha Shakti.
Yeah, good point, Matteo. And I think the world force is, I mean, life is the world force. It's a manifestation of the world force. So the creative part, the creative force, that's life is a certain dimension of that creative force.
It reminds me of that wonderful line, without him, I do not exist. Without me, he is unmanifest. And here's this beautiful beginning description of how he is in complete surrender to her and supporting her play, even though she is also profoundly ignorant because she's plunged into matter. And he supports all of that. Whatever she does, he supports. Remarkable.
Thank you very much for that.
One other thing we can all remember is that when we discuss this, a lot of our efforts are mental. By we're mental beings. That's what we do. And so we don't want to pin the transmission here too hard into mental forms, because it will slide out of them. They're not quite big enough to contain it.
And it's really nice I know it's nice for my mind to tease stuff out so that my mind actually relaxes around it, and then go through again, just letting the mind relax. There's lots of I guess people saying that the mind doesn't need to understand it at all. We can just turn our minds off and feel the mantra. That never really worked for me. I had to dig a lot at it to get to that point. And I think at that point also, like a real understanding, if I'm reading and I don't know who she is specifically, there's a part of my mind that's not letting go of it. There's a part of my mind that's like, where are we with this? What is it? Oh shit, I'm lost. What's actually happening here? What's he saying? And that part of my mind, it blocks the transmission from coming through.
Yeah, I really appreciate John Robert and Matteo, you too. But John Robert, at this morning, how you are able to go right to where that information is that we tend to lose, because all of a sudden we are in she and and you know exactly where that is. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And for everyone slowing us down too, I like all the questions. And I really like the personal shares too.
Yeah, well, I kind of like the fact that there's so much deep stuff here, right? And but in the chit chat, we're sort of focusing on technical details to some extent. But today that's what I need. I need for us to have a kind of a discussion about the technical details. So that I can deal with my own fragility through that way, and then leave open the deeper stuff, to do its work in the non-intellectual sense, right? So, yeah.
I think both of them are really valuable, both ways. I mean, Aurobindo is so, you can go line by line, word by word, and explore what he's doing to the extent that we can get a sense of it, or you can just let the messages kind of flow over you like a river. And I think all of it's really valuable to do.
Shall I continue? I won't read the last line on this page, so you can pick up right after that. But here were worlds lifted halfway to heaven. The veil was there, but not the shadowy wall. In forms not too remote from human grasp, some passion of the inviolate purity broke through, a ray of the original bliss. Heaven's joys might have been earth's, if earth were pure. There could have reached our divinized sense and heart some natural felicities bright, extreme, some thrill of supernature's absolutes. All strengths could laugh and sport on earth's hard roads, and never feel her cruel edge of pain. All love could play, and nowhere nature's shame. But she has stabled her dreams in matter's courts, and still her doors are barred to things supreme. These worlds could feel God's breath visiting their tops. Some glimmer of the transcendent's hem was there. Across the white aeonic silences, immortal figures of embodied joy traversed wide spaces near to eternity's sleep. Pure mystic voices in beatitude's hush appealed to love's immaculate sweetnesses, calling his honeyed touch to thrill the worlds, his blissful hands to seize on nature's limbs, his sweet intolerant might of union to take all beings into his Savior arms, drawing to his pity the rebel and the waif, to force on them the happiness they refuse. A chant hymeneal to the unseen divine, a flaming rhapsody of white desire lured an immortal music into the heart and woke the slumbering ear of ecstasy. A purer, fierier sense had there its home, a burning urge no earthly limbs can hold. One drew a large, unburdened, spacious breath, and the heart sped from beat to rapturous beat.
The voice of time sang of the immortal's joy, an inspiration and a lyric cry. The moments came with ecstasy on their wings. Beauty unimaginable moved heaven bare, absolved from boundaries in the vast of dream. The cry of the birds of wonder called from the skies to the deathless people of the shores of light. Creation leapt straight from the hands of God. Marvel and rapture wandered in the ways. Only to be was a supreme delight. Life was a happy laughter of the soul, and joy was king with love for minister. The spirit's luminousness was bodied there. Life's contraries were lovers or natural friends, and her extremes keen edges of harmony. Indulgence with a tender purity came and nursed the God on her maternal breast. There none was weak, so falsehood could not live. Ignorance was a thin shade protecting light. Imagination, the free will of truth. Pleasure, a candidate for heaven's fire. The intellect was beauty's worshipper. Strength was the slave of calm spiritual law. Power laid its head upon the breasts of bliss. There were summit glories inconceivable, autonomies of wisdom's still self-rule, and high dependencies of her virgin son, illumined theocracies of the seeing soul, throned in the power of the transcendent ray. A vision of grandeurs, a dream of magnitudes in sun-bright kingdoms moved with regal gait. Assemblies, crowded senates of the gods, life's puissances reigned on seats of marble will, high dominations and autocracies and laureled strengths and armed imperative mights. All objects there were great and beautiful. All beings wore a royal stamp of power.
There sat the oligarchies of natural law, proud, violent heads, served one calm monarch brow. All the soul's postures donned divinity. There met the ardent mutual intimacies of master of mastery's joy and the joy of servitude imposed by love on love's heart that obeys, and love's body held beneath a rapturous yoke. All was a game of meeting kinglinesses. For worship lifts the worshipper's bowed strength close to the God's pride, and bliss his soul adores. The ruler there is one with all he rules. To him who serves with a free, equal heart, obedience is his princely training school, his nobilities coronet and privilege. His faith is a high nature's idiom, his service a spiritual sovereignty. There were realms where knowledge joined creative power in her high home and made all his own. In her high home and made her all his own. The grand illuminate seized her gleaming limbs and filled them with the passion of his ray, till all her body was its transparent house, and all her soul a counterpart of his soul. Apotheosized, transfigured by wisdom's touch, her days became a luminous sacrifice. An immortal moth in happy endless fire, she burned in his sweet intolerable blaze. A captive life wedded her conqueror, a captive life wedded her conqueror. In his wide sky she built her world anew. She gave to mind's calm pace the motor's speed, to thinking a need to live what the soul saw, to living an impetus to know and see. His splendor grasped her puissance to him clung. She crowned the idea a king in purple robes, put her magic serpent scepter in thought's grip, made forms his inward vision's rhythmic shapes, and her acts the living body of his will.
A flaming thunder, a creator flash, his victor light rode on her deathless force. A centaur's mighty gallop bore the god, life throned with mind, a double majesty. Worlds were there of a happiness great and grave, an action tinged with dream, laughter with thought. And passion there could wait for its desire until it heard the near approach of God. Worlds were there of a childlike mirth and joy, a carefree youthfulness of mind and heart, found in the body a heavenly instrument. It lit an aureate halo round desire, and freed the deified animal in the limbs to divine gambols of love and beauty and bliss. On a radiant soil that gazed at heaven's smile, a swift life pulse stinted not nor stopped. It knew not how to tire. Happy were its tears. Their work was play, and play the only work. The tasks of heaven, a game of godlike might. a celestial bacchanal, forever pure, unstayed by faintness as in mortal frames. Life was an eternity of rapture's moods. Age never came. Care never lined the face. Imposing on the safety of the stars, a race and laughter of immortal strengths. The nude godchildren in their playfields ran, smiting the winds with splendor and with speed. Of storm and sun they made companions, sported with the white mane of tossing seas, slew distance, trampled to death under their wheels, and wrestled in the arenas of their force. Imperious in their radiance like the suns, they kindled heaven with the glory of their limbs, flung like a divine largesse to the world.
A spell to force the heart to stark delight. They carried the pride and mastery of their charm as if life's banner on the roads of space. Ideas were luminous comrades of the soul. Mind played with speech, cast javelins of thought, but needed not these instruments toil to know. Knowledge was nature's pastime like the rest. Investitured with a fresh heart's bright ray, an early God instinct's child inheritors, tenants of the perpetuity of time, still thrilling with the first creation's bliss, they steeped existence in their youth of soul. An exquisite and vehement tyranny, the strong compulsion of their will to joy, poured smiling streams of happiness through the world. There reigned a breath of high, immune content, a fortunate gait of days in tranquil air, a flood of universal love and peace. A sovereignty of tireless sweetness lived like a song of pleasure on the lips of time. A large, spontaneous order freed the will, a sun-frank winging of the soul to bliss, the breadth and greatness of the unfettered act, and the swift fire-heart's golden liberty. There was no falsehood of soul severance. There came no crookedness of thought or word to rob creation of its native truth. All was sincerity and natural force. There freedom was sole rule and highest law. In a happy series climbed or plunged these worlds, in realms of curious beauty and surprise, in fields of grandeur and of Titan power, life played at ease with her immense desires. 1,000 Edens she could build nor pause. No bound was set to her greatness and to her grace and to her heavenly variety.
Awake with the cry and stir of numberless souls, arisen from the breast of some deep infinite, smiling like a newborn child at love and hope, in her nature housing the immortal's power, in her bosom bearing the eternal will. No guide she needed but her luminous heart. No fall debased the godhead of her steps, no alien night had come to blind her eyes. There was no use for grudging ring or fence. Each act was a perfection and a joy. Abandoned to her rapid fancy's moods and the rich-colored riot of her mind, initiate of divine and mighty dreams, magician builder of unnumbered forms, exploring the measures of the rhythms of God, at will she wove her wizard wonder dance, a Dionysian goddess of delight, a bacchant of creative ecstasy.
That was a trip.
Quite.
Yeah, I had notes. I had made notes to myself in this section right at the beginning. Appeal to love's immaculate sweetnesses, called his honey touch to thrill the world. I had written erotic question mark, and then I skipped half a thing down, and it a chant hymeneal to the unseen divine, a flaming rhapsody of white desire. And they said, yes, erotic.
Absolutely. It's, yep. Yeah.
Reminds me of Keats. When I was reading, I was thinking about Keats because Keats' poetry is very sensual poetry, and it has echoes here of Keats.
I think Aurobindo has exquisite erotic poetry all throughout. Just mind-blowingly exquisite eros. Yeah. I was struck by one line that is on page 124, about 10 some down. And joy was king, with love for a minister. So I tend to put love as the highest reality of the divine. And here it says, and joy was king, with love for minister. And it reminds me, when I was a teenager, my father talked about God. How was the line? Delight is the creator. Delight is the creator. That was, and he later came to Sri Aurobindo, and it was like this perfect fit, you know. But at that time, that's what he said. Delight is the creator. Is that the original creative force?
I think this whole section was bursting with that creative delight, that force, and such a rich profusion of images and of music. And I'm liking where we've gone from the first expression of life in this kind of endless cycle of suffering and despair to now being in a relationship with another realm, and this being a fruitful one. One that is, you know, bringing the being to much more joyful and much more like fecund expressions. So there's so much of that in this section, and it's an interesting, because he also incorporates this aspect of power and how power is shared in this arrangement. Like there's still a monarchy of, and all the kinglinesses, and there's master and slave as well, but it's in a non-fallen state. It's in a kind of, it's almost in a honeymoon of working together for this creative manifestation. And I think what just glimpsing ahead into the next section, it does seem like this is a honeymoon and that there's trouble on the horizon.
Yeah, I want to stay here. I really do. Give me bliss anytime.
Yeah, although Dionysian is hardly smooth sailing. Yeah.
Yep.
That's true. It's a tumultuous bliss or tumultuous ecstasy. That ecstasy has a dark side to it too.
Yeah.
I don't know of anybody who can express delight and beauty like Sri Aurobindo. I mean, we have great artists, and often our works of art, like especially our narratives, are full of struggle and pain and effort, and the delight comes only at the end. But Sri Aurobindo can just go page after page after page of this exquisite and always creative expression of Ananda.
No,
I don't know anybody else can do that.
Yeah.
Somewhere en route today, soul got infused, but I didn't catch where. Did anyone catch where?
What got infused?
Soul came in.
Uh-huh.
But I didn't catch where it came. Yeah, I was kind of scanning for it.
Page 127. At the top, they steeped existence in their youth of soul. That's one of them. On page 125, towards the bottom, to thinking and need to live what the soul saw. So the soul is all there, everywhere.
Also at the top of page 127, second line from the top.
Yeah, and I don't think soul was present, except for Ashwapati. I don't think soul was present in the beginning sections.
So page 124, just before "and joy was king," the line before "life was a happy laughter of the soul."
Good, thank you. I didn't hallucinate it. You all found like 4 really quickly. So was it just in this section then that soul came in? Yeah.
No.
No, was it before?
No, because in page 122, at the 4th lines from the end, his soul a moving picture's changeful film, which is I actually noted because of the moving picture, but but soul's in there as well.
but that might be Ashwapati's soul rather than the soul that entered
Right.
in life field.
Okay.
It's I don't know. It's there's something subtle that I was kind of that was popping up for me.
Okay, shall we get for the the closing of this?
Go for the
incredible
final
thing?
section. Yeah.
See what happens?
After the Dionysian bacchanal.
I'm reminded of a poem by Robert Frost. Nothing green can stay. So here we go. This world of bliss he saw and felt its call, but found no way to enter into its joy. Across the conscious gulf there was no bridge. A darker air encircled still his soul, tied to an image of unquiet life. In spite of yearning mind and longing sense, to a sad thought by gray experience formed, and a vision dimmed by care and sorrow and sleep, all this seemed only a bright, desirable dream, conceived in a longing distance by the heart of one who walks in the shadow of earth pain. Although he once had felt the Eternal's clasp, too near to suffering worlds his nature lived, and where he stood were entrances of night. Hardly, too close beset by the world's care, can the dense mold in which we have been made return sheer joy to joy, pure light to light. For its tormented will to think and live, first to a mingled pain and pleasure woke, and still it keeps the habit of its birth. A dire duality is our way to be.
In the crude beginnings of this mortal world, life was not, nor mind's play, nor heart's desire. When earth was built in the unconscious void, and nothing was save a material scene, identified with sea and sky and stone, her young gods yearned for the release of souls asleep in objects, vague, inanimate. In that desolate grandeur, in that beauty bare, in the deaf stillness, mid the unheeded sounds, heavy was the uncommunicated load of Godhead in a world that has no needs, for none was there to feel or to receive. This solid mass, which brooked no throb of sense, could not contain their vast creative urge. Immersed no more in matter's harmony, the spirit lost its statuesque repose. In the uncaring trance, it groped for sight, passioned for the movements of a conscious heart, famishing for speech and thought and joy and love in the dumb, insensitive wheeling day and night, hungered for the beat of yearning and response. The poised in conscience, shaken with a touch, the intuitive silence trembling with a name, they cried to life to invade the senseless mold, and in brute forms awake divinity. A voice was heard on the mute rolling globe, a murmur moaned in the unlistening void. A being seemed to breathe where once was none, something pent up in dead, insentient depths, denied conscious existence, lost to joy, turned as if one asleep since dateless time. Aware of its own buried reality, remembering its forgotten self and right, it yearned to know, to aspire, to enjoy, to live.
Life heard the call and left her native light, overflowing from her bright, magnificent plain on the rigid coil and sprawl of mortal space. Here too, the gracious, great-winged angel poured her splendor and her swiftness and her bliss, hoping to fill a fair new world with joy. As comes a goddess to a mortal's breast, and fills his days with her celestial clasp, She stooped to make her home in transient shapes. In matter's womb, she cast the immortal's fire. In the unfeeling vast woke thought and hope, smote with her charm and beauty, flesh and nerve, and forced delight on earth's insensible frame. Alive and clad with trees and herbs and flowers, earth's great brown body smiled towards the skies. Azure replied to azure in the sea's laugh. New sentient creatures filled the unseen depths. Life's glory and swiftness ran in the beauty of beasts. Man dared and thought and met with his soul the world. But while the magic breath was on its way, before her gifts could reach our prisoned hearts, a dark, ambiguous presence questioned all. The secret will that robes itself with night and offers to spirit the ordeal of the flesh, imposed a mystic mask of death and pain. Interned now in the slow and suffering years, sojourns the winged and wonderful wayfarer, and can no more recall her happier state, but must obey the inert in conscience law, insensible foundation of a world in which blind limits are on beauty laid, and sorrow and joy as struggling comrades live. A dim and dreadful muteness fell on her. Abolished was her subtle, mighty spirit, and slain her boon of child god happiness, and all her glory into littleness turned, and all her sweetness into a maimed desire. To feed death with her works is here life's doom. So veiled was her immortality that she seemed inflicting consciousness on unconscious things, an episode in an eternal death, a myth of being that must forever cease. Such was the evil mystery of her change.
I see why you wanted to stay put in the previous section, Andrea.
Yeah.
And soul comes in, the God's longing for it. It's really an immense thing that we've taken on. It's an immense and difficult thing that we've taken on by being born. I sense that there was a choice somewhere along the way. I don't have memory of it, but I sense that that's true.
I'm curious about the dark, ambiguous presence that questions all, which is also a secret will that robes itself with night and offers to the spirit the ordeal of the flesh, and that imposes this mystic mask of death and pain. That's, I think, an interesting character in this drama that's playing out between Ashwapati life and the transcendent. Matteo, you earlier brought in the Ishwara and the unnamed but varying aspects, of the divine that are present in this text. I wonder if there's a corresponding person to this ambiguous presence who kind of makes this deal or this like offer of life, but at the expense of death and suffering. This is I think an interesting emergence in the text here at this point. Yeah.
Now, Marco, I think you really picked out some really, really significant lines in this last section. You just zeroed right in on them. A dark, ambiguous, the secret will of capital that robes itself with night, capital, and offers to the spirit. How would you like to have this? The ordeal of flesh. Oh, goody, just what I was thinking about. Imposed a mystic mask of death and pain.
So might that be the Lord of Falsehood? The one that twisted the whole thing?
We're going to meet this character. This character is going to grow in importance. This is a really central character in the story.
So ultimately, this is death?
In a lot of forms, yeah. It's also it comes in between the life cantos and the mind cantos. It comes in as the mother of evil. And Andrea mentioned falsehood. It's the worlds of falsehood, the mother of evil, and the sons of darkness. It takes on many shapes. I think simplified, it's death. Right, that's the duality. I don't know where we are. Page 129. He mentions a dire duality is our way to be. That what's life without its dual face in this sense, death, and that's the world that we're in. And the call, the spur of our evolution. Right, I hear it in the wake up, I need to manifest. I go through that too. There's a spur there.
I think there's an interesting reference to Canto 1, to the beginning of Canto 1, the fourth line from the bottom on page 129. So, a being seen to breathe where once was none, something pent up in dead insentient depths, turned as if one asleep since stateless time. And if you look at the first few lines of Canto 1, the beginning of Savitri, you will see this beginning.
And echoes of Marco's discussion about waking up this morning. And its uncertainties.
In some ways, we've come full circle. Thank you, Marco.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I feel just more of a personal note. I feel a close relationship with this presence, this dark, ambiguous presence, and this mask of death and pain seems to be playing a very prominent role these days, and so that did jump out at me for that partly for that reason, and because that P is capitalized and the will, the W is capitalized in will there, and the slow and suffering years. When I think about this, coronavirus episode that we're undergoing right now, and how, there's this wishful thinking at the beginning of it where, oh, won't, affect us, it'll blow by, it won't change things too much. And then you start to do a little bit more reading and research, and what do the real epidemiologists say, and what are the patterns that these kinds of things play out, how do they play out? And it's never just a few weeks. The Spanish flu went on for like 2 years practically, I think, and there was an initial wave, and then there was a second wave, which is bigger and worse. And this was at the time of world wars, so much going on, and how what we hope might be over soon, so that we can return to the realms of bliss and delight and sleep and just pure creative joy without conflict and without the shadow of death. How that is not quick to return. There's much more to go through before we can get out of this conundrum of matter that we're in. I also relate to this dim and dreadful muteness, and this feeling sometimes that when you have this presence that is reminding you of death, it can be difficult to speak. It can be difficult to just purely express one's inner world, because it's really overshadowed by the the specter of death, and that that binary that we find ourselves in the middle of. And how there's a different comradeship here. Like the word comrade comes in toward the end here, where sorrow and joy as struggling comrades live. And before, it was the soul that was a comrade of the mind, I believe. I don't have the exact line, but it came up when, Matteo, you were looking for references to soul. Ideas were luminous comrades of the soul. So we've gone from ideas and soul to sorrow and joy as the two who are going together here. Yeah, I think we're coming back full circle.
I almost feel that Aurobindo could have written the word coronavirus into this thing, and it would have, because in a way it's king virus. I mean, corona, it's because of the shape of the molecule, but it also is a reference to something else there. So
we have to obey.
So for Marco and Jeffrey, I'm sure Andre and John Robert know this, the mother got the 1918 flu in Japan. It was a serious battle. I don't know the details of the story. Maybe
I did not
either
know
one.
that.
Yeah. John Robert, do you know? It's
well, this flu was going around in Japan, and the mother said, I wondered what it was. What is this? And so she went into trance.
And
in trance, she met it, and it appeared to her as a beheaded soldier. Let's see. Okay, Karen got that. And so she made battle with it, and she was sick for, I don't know, a day or two, and then she overcame it, and then it started to decline in Japan. So it was a like a mythic presence, or like a mythological presence, an actual being that was manifesting in this way.
I was seeing if I could find a quick reference, but I don't see it. I'm in Georges von Veckrum's book in the Tokyo section, but I don't quite see it yet. Anyway, there's a deep story there. Thanks, John Robert.
So I definitely think that we need to reread this. Obviously not today, but the next time.
You don't think we should?
I think we should.
Oh,
It
thank you.
needs it.
Yeah,
It
I would
needs
love
it.
to have a
Yeah.
smooth pass through it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, good.
You guys, lovely to be with you all. I need to,
Yep.
thank you, thank you.
Would you,
Thank you.
Andrea has to scoot. Would you all like to end with a meditation? I know Andrea has to go. But
I think a little medication would be nice. Yeah. Yeah.
Same.
good.
And-
Okay.
Hey, we're not meeting for 2 weeks, and hey, a lot can go on in 2 weeks. So.
Oh, well, good. Right after the meditation, I'll stop the recording. Could everyone hang for just a quick second? I want to share something with you about the Savitri immersion.
Okay.
I don't think I need to stop the recording. I guess, John Robert, I would say we're probably 100% sure to cancel it. We haven't done it officially yet, but we're discussing to move it on to in some way, shape, or form onto Zoom for that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, in not reading start to finish, but maybe doing like a deep pass through a number of sections. And yeah, it might be easier for you two. I'm talking with Jeffrey and Marco, for you two to join. It's Friday, May 1st through Monday, May 5th or something like that, but it hasn't quite taken shape. John Robert, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you summarized it well, Matteo. We don't exactly what we want to do. If anything, I mean, I think we're definitely considering something online, but we don't know what it is yet.
So it's kind of a save the date if you two are interested in joining us. Yeah. Did I say March? I meant May.
I think you said May.
No, you said May. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Originally, I was going to be away in May, but obviously that's not going to happen now. So.
Yeah.
So I think it could happen. So.
Okay.
And most of California has what's it called? Shelter in place laws right now being issued. Like technically I could get $1,000 fine for driving somewhere that's not health and food related right now. I don't know about Placer County or Boulder, Colorado. You're outside of Boulder, you're in
Yeah,
Boulder?
not yet.
Not yet.
Maybe coming.
Yeah. So let's shelter.
They've left the grocery stores,
Banks.
liquor store, banks, and
Liquor
dispensaries.
stores.
Liquor stores and dispensaries are exempt.
Yeah. Well, I kind of realized that because I have bronchitis issues, recurring bronchitis issues, so I realized that I may be in the vulnerable category. So I'm actually. It's not, I don't need a law to tell me not to go out. I'm just not going to go out. And I have friends who've offered to buy me groceries and things. So
nice.
Yeah.
My parents very well. They're in Australia. They're in New Zealand and may get. They can't go. Their ticket was to Australia to Tasmania. They can't fly there now, and more than likely they'll be quarantined when they return. And I'm going to go stock their fridge with groceries beforehand, if that's even possible. Yeah, it's interesting times. It's a little shocking to the system, but it's really nice to be with you all, and that we can do this almost in our normal rhythm with continuity. I appreciate these groups.
Yeah, a lot of my life actually doesn't change because of this.
Mine too.
I have like one foot in the virtual most of the time. So I think the internet is the big winner of this whole pandemic, for better or worse. So till next time, if anything changes in the meantime, I presume we'll be able to be in touch. Either email or Signal or the forum.
Infinite conversations.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, friends.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.